Welcome into the KINGSBEAT podcast. I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Of course, we are brought to you by Prize Picks, and we are a Blue Wire podcast. So thanks for joining us. Today, no Brendan Nunez, but we do have Fox 40, Sean Cunningham. Sean, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. All things considered, I think I've had a nice, relaxing start to the week, kind of getting things ramped up, and all of a sudden super busy again, even with the Kings on the road, finding a lot of stuff to stay busy with. So yeah, things are good. Got my podcast candle today. We went with the we don't have Brendan here today, so I know you don't have a candle, but mahogany balsam in it. That's a good one.
Oh.
That's a fragrant candle. Yeah.
Does it smell of rich
mahogany?
Rich mahogany and old books. Nice. Brendan is away. He's got some family business he has to take care of this weekend. We're going to give him a free pass. This is, one of those ones you unfortunately have to deal with sometimes. So well wishes to Brendan and his family. But Sean and I are here. Sean, the miracle of all miracles happened. I don't know how it happened.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Last night, it happened.
You saw the
Sean.
Golden Globes. You saw the Golden Globes, and
that is not what happened.
Oh no!
I won Prize Picks, Sean.
Oh, liar!
Yes,
Prove it.
I won. I picked. I had a 6 pick. I selected all kinds of good stuff, which usually doesn't work out for me. I was a bit derailed by the fact that Kevin Huerter went out in the first quarter, which I'm sure we'll get to. But anytime that happens on Prize Picks, one of the good things is that you don't just lose because you selected a player that got injured. It actually just reboots and you get to keep playing. With a little asterisk that you now have 5 selections instead of 6. Anyway, Sean, Domantas Sabonis over 4 free throws made. He had 5.
Okay.
Keegan Murray over 0.5 dunks. He had 1
you
dunk.
like that one. You like that one.
I love it. It's only failed me once. Which everything else has failed me way more than once.
Oh, sure.
I chose more on Malik Monk with points and assists, which was set at 22.5. He finished with 24.
Got that.
Trey Lyles, 7.5 points, finished with 8. That pair of free throws late.
Ooh,
close. And then Terry Rozier.
Scary Terry.
Free throws made was set at 4. He had 7.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. So it's a flex play. So I actually did really well. Hitting all 5 that were remaining after Kevin Huerter got hurt and sort of the reboot happened there. But yeah, I'm having a good time, Sean. Prize Picks is fun. So if you guys were out there, most of the time I do not fare well, but this was a good day. So I now have more to play with down the road. So if you're interested in Prize Picks, you can go down below in the description. We have a link. Use the password KINGSBEAT, all one word. I believe that's what the password is. If it doesn't work,
sure, huh?
Don't blame me, but I think that's what it is. So either way, I had a good time. I know that people have a good time making fun of me for being so bad at Prize Picks, but it just adds a little bit to each and every night when you're playing. So let's get to a couple other things. Number 1, if you're watching here on YouTube, give us a thumbs up if you don't mind. Subscribe to the channel. We would like to do a live show, but it's in the middle of the day. We don't do live shows during the middle of the day. Brendan's gone a little off, but we are getting together after Sacramento Kings came off of back-to-back wins on the road. First of all, it's the first time this season that they've won both of the back-to-backs. So that's a Christmas miracle. It's also
Christmas.
Yeah, it's only the second time.
Buddy.
Yeah, exactly. It's only the second time that they've won the second game of a back-to-back. So all of a sudden, maybe they're turning the tide after starting 0-4 on the second night of back-to-backs. Let's see. Last thing, if you're watching here, thumbs up. but also jump on board with the Kings Beat. Go to thekingsbeat.com, become a premium subscriber to get access to everything that we do here at the Kings Beat. Yeah, we've been sending out a lot of stuff. Now, Sean, let's start with the Kevin Huerter thing. I mean, we're going to get into both these games, but Kevin Huerter on Tuesday night regains his starting job over Chris Duarte. A 5 or 6 game sample size for Chris Duarte did not go well. And so Mike Brown made the switch back to Kevin Huerter. Man, have you ever seen a player get hurt that quickly in a game?
No, not that I can think of, and I know that I was out on an assignment, so I was listening to a good portion of it on the radio, and then went back and tried to watch through social media clips. I still don't think I've seen where it happens. I know we were talking, and you mentioned that he may have backpedaled and stepped on someone's foot. I ultimately thought, even before seeing it, that he must have. This happens when you get older. Sometimes you just take a bad step. Not that you've turned your ankle or anything like that, but you're trying to maybe shake off some pain that happens in your ankle or your foot or your heel or whatever. And thought that maybe something like that had happened, and was hoping it may not be like a, stress fracture or anything like that. You've seen some weird things happen in both football and baseball over the years, but no, I mean, in basketball, that was about as an odd one as it comes. So, but hearing, obviously that he'll be questionable going into Friday's game in Philadelphia. They're calling it a left ankle sprain. So, yeah, I guess we'll just see what happens there. But tough timing for him after he was able to crack the rotation and kind of come back into the starting five, and it kind of came off of a game where we talk about some of these blowouts and how even in these blowout losses, it ends up being some opportunity for guys to maybe get right a little bit. And I thought certainly that Pelicans debacle was a game where if you had to choose a bright spot, he might have been one of them, because he goes 6 of 10 shooting, 17 points, I think it was. The three ball's still a little bit tough out there for him, but I even asked him right before we went on the road trip in the locker room if that was maybe a silver lining. He wasn't taking any of that. He hated that loss, and that loss certainly had a lingering effect on that locker room. So, but certainly it was something in the grand scheme of things to say, hey, you saw the ball go down, and hopefully that can carry over into the road trip. And obviously seeing him in that starting five for Detroit, Mike Brown was able to reward him for that, and was hoping to see him get a go in Charlotte as well.
Yeah. So from what I've seen, like I've watched, like it's just like the Zapruder film. Like we've seen so many angles now. It's like either that or it's more like the Seinfeld version of. But the tip off happens. The ball gets knocked into the backcourt where Terry Rozier goes and gets it. By the time they pan the camera around and he crosses half court, Kevin Huerter's already hopping on 1 foot. And you're like, what in the world happened? And
Someone shot
then,
him.
yeah, it totally bizarre. So he actually, the ball goes up. Like he ends up, well, I guess they go back to the other end of the court. He tries to play through it, but instantly fouls and stops the game and goes straight to the locker room. I think it was like 46 seconds into the game. There's another angle that I found where as the tip goes up, it gets knocked into the backcourt. Kevin Huerter goes to backpedal out of the circle. Everyone lines up around the circle for the tip off. And he steps on Keegan Murray's foot, who is also backpedaling. And it happens like that quick. Just rolls his ankle really quick. It didn't even look like it was that serious. So I'm a little confused how like that could happen, how you could be that injured. But we had it like a couple of games before where Trey Lyles was backpedaling down court and got injured out of nowhere. And so hopefully Kevin Huerter is quickly on the mend. The Kings need him to figure it out. Sean mentioned the Detroit game. He did pick up the start in that game. He still can't hit his 3-point shot at all. But I thought despite that, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, he's at least trying to figure out how to help the team. And then the Chris Duarte situation, I don't even know really how to explain it other than to tell you that, he gets the start and everything looks good right off the bat. He's super active. He has a game where he goes out and he grabbed, he scored 12 points, grabbed 7 rebounds, right? And of those 7 rebounds, 4 of them were offensive. And of those 4, he put 3 of them back in for a layup. And so he was being able to create his own shot, sort of like get some things going without someone running a play for him. Sean, from that moment on, he went the next 3 games without a rebound at all. He had 1 assist in each of the next 3 games. He had 0 points, 10 points, and 1 point. And again, Mike Brown pulled the plug. Can the Kings survive a season where their productivity out of their starters, because the real true shooting guard on this team is not either one of those guys. It's Malik Monk this season. But can the Kings survive a season where you're getting very little production, not only out of that starting shooting guard position, but maybe even the starting small forward position, where Harrison Barnes' stats look very similar to what I just said with Chris Duarte?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer for that. I think that's some uncharted territory. I don't think you really truly know if you can. I think the disappointing thing is a lot like, certainly you've seen Kevin Huerter struggle to find his shot at various times. The season obviously started off really terrible and kind of found it again. Found a way to contribute. You mentioned the 5 assists and 5 boards in the Detroit game, but he was, James, I mean, I wrote it down a minute ago, 2 of 11 in that game. And Mike Brown was talking about guys who've struggled and guys he's replaced with in rotations, and there just hasn't been any separation. You'd like to see some guys who've played really, really well. You've seen Keon Ellis come in at times, who certainly played well at various times, and other times he's just been kind of just out there. Not a big, separation from guys like Kevin Huerter or Davion Mitchell to really truly take the reins and hold it. You mentioned Chris Duarte, who, I know he takes over. He didn't play at all in the Detroit game. And then the next night in Charlotte last night, thought he was okay. Didn't think he was terrific by any stretch. I mean, obviously he's not much of a scorer. They're asking him to be more of a defender. To me, it's all about him staying out of foul trouble, because I do like his activity, especially on the defensive end when they're sorely needing it. So,
and his physicality. His physicality stands out as well.
For sure. And, Mike Brown, that's one of the things that is often talked about when it comes to somebody like Trey Lyles. Now, obviously, Trey Lyles when he started the season, 3-point shot has been there. He's been pretty productive since coming. Obviously, he had a setback coming out of camp with his injury, but he's been a guy that you can rely on, and he's helped him a lot in that regard. And I think Mike Brown looks at Duarte as a similar type of player where you can help the physicality as long as you're staying out of foul trouble. Don't turn the ball over. Hopefully being able to knock down a shot. I know Mike Brown has confidence that he can be a 3-point shooter, and realizing that Chris Duarte is still so very young, that it maybe hasn't gone quite as they'd envisioned, but I think he's going to take some time. That's just a long-winded way to say that this team is not, in my mind, the team you're going to know come playoff time, through all their trials and tribulations, to say that, can they survive? Well, I think they can. I mean, James, I think it's the thing that is the constant struggle with this team. Like, you've seen, you're sometimes you're too close to it and you see how the sausage is made, and it's like, wow, you've really haven't played that well, but somehow you've won 6 of 8 and you're 23-14 overall.
9 games over 500.
Right. You get to the point where you're like, all right, what are you? What do you hang your hat on? And can you survive a playoff series? Can you sustain a playoff run? Can you have these type of successes that you're hoping to have come April? And I think the answer to that, most people wouldn't even, people like us who are covering the team, is no, you probably don't have the ultimate faith that this will work in a playoff series. But here we are at 23-14, certainly understanding that they have their flaws, certainly knowing that this front office is going to go out there and do things to try and make it better. But to your point, to your original question, can they survive it? They are surviving it. So that's why I don't know. Fortunately, they've had some big pieces continue to be star players. De'Aaron Fox, for the majority of the season, has looked like an all-star. I know he's kind of hit a little bit of a skid here of late, and not looking like De'Aaron Fox that we've known for to be this 30-point scorer and getting out and running, and he kind of looks a little bit hobbled at times. But Domantas Sabonis is playing at a just an incredible level. And then you've got Malik Monk, who more times than not is playing at a great level as well. So I think right now the proof is kind of in the pudding, but I don't know that we believe in the recipe all that much.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Last season, the Kings started 20-17 to their first 37. Then they dropped to 20-18. So at 38 games, which the Kings will be at game 38 tomorrow, I believe, the Kings are way ahead of where they were last year. Way ahead. And that's saying something, because last year was a good season. They're pacing to have a tremendous season. And I don't know that they can keep this up while having these major problems at both the shooting guard and the small forward position. But as long as you're getting productivity out of guys like Malik Monk, guys like Trey Lyles, who has been tremendous, like as long as you're getting that kind of like strength off of the bench, I think you have a shot. So, I mean, I think the Kings are going to try to improve one or both of these positions over the coming weeks. I think that they're going to be active. We've heard the Siakam rumors. We've heard plenty of other things that may or may not ever come to fruition. I even know as we're recording this podcast, like there are some murmurs that there might be something on the horizon here. We have no idea as of right now until something happens. Whether we hear that before everyone else does or somebody else puts that out there, it does feel like this Kings front office is trying to be aggressive, trying to address some of these needs. And like, look, this team has holes. Like, there's no question this team has holes. You would like to see guys like Kevin Huerter, who averaged 15.2 points per game last season, or Harrison Barnes, who had right at 15 points per game last season, sort of find themselves and get back in the fray. But at the same time, what we're seeing from Keegan Murray and De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis and Malik Monk on a nightly basis is pretty stellar. Like, this team is like moving in the right direction, even if it doesn't feel good at certain times. Sean, Kings, let's start with the Detroit game just real quickly. These are two bad teams that the Kings just beat stacked up, Detroit and Charlotte on back-to-backs. You would expect the Kings to beat both teams, but the way the Detroit game started, where they give up 47 points to the worst team in the NBA, a 3-win team, but they give up like 47 points in the first quarter. What was going through your head while that's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that went through my head was sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better. You know, you're coming off of a Pelicans game, closing off a 2-2 homestand in a game where you trailed by 50. And it resulted in a 33-point loss to the Pelicans. Again, a team that has had their number 4 times this season, 2 30-point losses, 133, 136. Just really kind of have a little bit of ownership there. And then you go into Detroit and it's a 47-29 first quarter. And I'll be honest, James, at no point did I ever think they were going to lose that game. And that had nothing to do, to be honest, it had nothing to do with just, the Kings, but you're looking at the Detroit Pistons in that game and the way they're shooting from 3 and the way they're playing. And you're just like, you will not be able to sustain this. You jumped out to this nice start. I remember I actually watched the entire Celtics game where they gave the Celtics a big run for their money. Like, the adage is true. Even for a 3-win team, they do play hard. It's just, they tend to falter. And I think that's that third quarter, or that second quarter, really kind of said everything you needed to know about the Kings. I mean, to be able to come back and take a lead, and be able to go into halftime with a lead was completely reassuring. But I think it might have been a little bit of a wake-up call. And the one thing that just stood out like a sore thumb to me in that game was seeing the way Domantas Sabonis reacted to his team. I mean, you're seeing him dunk and scream and holler, doing anything he can to just get them to wake the hell up, because they go on that 39-18 run in that second quarter, and every single quarter that from there on, they're a 30-point quarter. And you even look at that fourth quarter, they held the Pistons to just 15 points. So that second half, you held the Pistons to under what you gave up in that first quarter. And again, it was alarming I guess, but again, I never thought the Kings would lose that game. But again, it was just kind of speaks to, if the Kings just don't have their heart into it, if they don't have their, give a damn, then any team is capable of going on this big run. And a lot of times when you go on this big run, the Kings don't really have much fight sometimes to come back from it. And fortunately, Sacramento did, and you were playing a team like Detroit, and then you get you're able to close out that game, go to Charlotte, and get your revenge on that team as well.
All right, so hidden within that game, I mean, we'll get to Domantas Sabonis in a minute, because specifically the Detroit game, you just watched a guy who the way I described it on the radio was it reminded me of, I know Sean will get this, reminded me of Goonies when they're trying to escape the ship, and Sloth sits there and holds the rock up so all the kids can climb between his legs and get out to freedom. And then, Sloth later escapes, but that moment where he's holding up a rock and letting everybody else like scurry out the door. And that's what it looked like to me, is one dude just trying to give you a shot. Like, if you're going to give a 47 in the first quarter, you can't score like 22, because then it's over. Like, the way that he just kept playing and saying, someone will come in and help us. Someone will help me. Someone will find a way to get active. It was like a really, really strong moment for me, where I think Sabonis was a tremendous leader on the court. And then what we saw was the starters went out. Malik Monk comes in along with Sabonis, and Monk had that same exact mentality. All of a sudden, he's playing hard, and he's like setting guys up and running at breakneck speed. And then next thing you know, Keegan Murray comes in the game and realizes, oh, this is a team with Jaden Ivey, that guy that everyone celebrated as a top 4 pick, even though he was the 5th pick, and Keegan was a 4th pick, and they took all these pictures with the top 4 picks, and Keegan wasn't there. And then Keegan starts going, and so you start to see this thing.
By the way, I
yeah,
forgot all about that. That's funny.
Or the night that he's drafted, that the picture they used was Chris and not Keegan. Yeah,
Sure.
A little disrespected on draft night, and I think with Keegan like stepping into that role, it was like, okay, wait a sec, that's that dude. I'm not going to let this happen, and he starts plugging away, and then like it all kind of snowballs. But I think the question I was going to ask of you was, we've watched De'Aaron Fox here, do some amazing things in the first half of the season. But it started last week. It started with the Orlando game where he didn't look right. And then the Toronto game, he was okay. But again, you get to the Pelicans game and he scores 3 points. You get to the Detroit game, he finds a way to score 26 points. But let's be honest, he was like the 3rd or 4th option in that game. I'd say the 4th option of who played well and who didn't. He also has that moment, isn't it, on the breakaway where he throws the ball straight up in the air when he's about to dunk.
You think he'll get on Shaqtin' a Fool for that?
Well, I think he deserves to be. Yeah,
that was pretty incredible.
It kind of looked like he was space jammed, like somebody just like pulled the basketball player out of him for a few minutes. Anyway, he finishes that up with 19 points against Charlotte. And I thought the Charlotte game is the first time we see him start to come around, where he actually looks a lot more like himself. So I don't want to heap a bunch of negativity on the guy, because he's basically carried the team all season long on the scoring end. But 17 points per game over his last 5. He's shooting 41% from the field. He's shooting 34.6 from 3. He's actually only shooting 5.2 attempts per game from 3. He's not getting to the free throw line, only 2.2 free throw attempts per game. This just looks like a player who wore himself out. Is that what you're seeing?
Well, yeah, I can see how someone would come to that. I think he's dealing with a couple things. I mean, we've seen him kind of grab the wrist a few times during that homestand.
The hip.
I know.
You get hit
Yeah,
twice on the hip.
he also tends to walk a little like a basketball player. I don't like to call it an old man or anything, because a lot of basketball players, you see them walk, they're just kind of like got a little bit of a
Straight-legged.
yeah, or just a little bit of a stride to them, where it's just like, oh, you could tell something's bothering them. You have to kind of get those joints, lubricated a bit and they get going. And I think it's certainly manageable. I think Fox has shown a tremendous toughness since his time in Sacramento. He doesn't like to use, certainly last year was incredible. I mean, he took I think I'm back there. So I think I glitched a little bit there. But Fox doesn't like to use any of those. Fox doesn't like to use injuries as excuses. And last year you really saw that. But anytime you ask him, it's, oh, I'm fine. He's not. He would play. There's a lot of times. There's not a lot of times, but there's been moments where the staff almost has to save him from himself a little bit to really kind of recalibrate and kind of get some time to rest some things. But I don't know. I think I banged up is probably more what I've seen from him. I did question, does success for the Kings look like him being a 30-point scorer? And I don't know that that's the best recipe for their success. I think we talked about that in the last podcast. Certainly he's shown the ability to be that guy. But I don't know if that's in their best interest.
I agree.
The usage of him is so incredibly high, and
it's not just a usage; it's the shots.
The shot, sure, certainly.
Yeah.
We were used to seeing so often where it was fourth quarter Fox, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you're seeing moments where we all want to see him keep the foot on the gas and do that thing, and he's doing it. But now it's almost to the point where, like, oh shit, is he doing it too much? Is it too frequent? Does he need? And so now you can kind of see where it's like, all right, yeah, you could probably use some more help, more of a consistent scoring presence from guys like Keegan Murray, who's kind of been up and down. Certainly, as you pointed out, these last 2 games, he's been fantastic and kind of found that stroke again. But, how much do you rely on that? How much do they need him to be that guy? Especially if Malik Monk doesn't have a game where he's scoring. So this team has scoring all over the place. And I always shy away from, like, when people are worried about, oh, Kevin Huerter's not hitting shots, or, Harrison Barnes isn't scoring, his scoring is down or whatever. It's like, they've got scoring everywhere, to where to me, it's never really an issue. But the one guy I do tend to have a little concern for is De'Aaron. And that's, is Fox going to be that guy? Can he be that guy? And should he be that guy?
Look,
and hold on, can I say one more thing? Like, no, he should be that guy, right? I'm saying, I just don't know if you should be. I don't want to take away, like, yes, he is that guy, right? He's the face of the franchise. He's that guy. I just don't know if it's in his best interest to be the guy where you're having him score 30 points a game on average and having to rely on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us could see a point where it's possible that the Kings would be better as a team if he was scoring 28 and maybe 2 of his shots per game are going to, Keegan, or they're going to Harrison Barnes to try to get him going, or Kevin Huerter to try to, like, smooth things out and figure out, what's happening with Kevin Huerter. But at the same time, like, look, if you are capable, why not? And as long as it, like, truly isn't hurting the team is really good. Like, they're, again, 9 games over 500. Is there room for improvement? Heck yeah. But to me, like, I think that there are going to be times throughout the season, and maybe it's once, maybe it's twice, where we see this 5 or 6 games stretch where he just hits a wall, like, physically and even mentally. I think the Detroit game, the ball, like, shooting out of his hands, some of the turnovers he's had in the last week, they tell me that not only is he physically exhausted, but he might be a little mentally fatigued as well. And just, he's not as sharp as he normally is, if that makes sense. And so I think he'll play right through it. And I would be surprised if he didn't try over the next, like, week and a half, 2 weeks, to get back up closer to 30 points a game. He's all the way down, I think, to 27.9 as we're recording this pod on Thursday. But, like, look, it's tough once you dip below 30. That means that, you got to put up 30 plus every single game to get back over it. And it's going to take a little while for him to recover, I think. you mentioned Keegan Murray in the last couple of games that he's had. We're waiting for the moment where Keegan can do that every night and be consistent, because again, you had the 47-point game and the 25-point game right afterwards, but then you have these stretches where again he just kind of disappears, and it's part of being a young player. So like I don't have any problems with who and what he is. He's averaging 16.2 points. He's averaging 5.5 assists. I mean, rebounds. He's up to 37.2% from three after some real struggles. But like we're waiting for the ironing out of these sort of dips that he has. And he's only had one bad game out of like his last five, where, he's got 28 points, 18, and then 8, and then 32 and 25. So he's been really good. But before that, there was another stretch where it was 5 points, 9 points, and a couple of games at 10. Is this just a young player thing in your mind, or, do the Kings have to, be cognizant that this is a young player and, he's going to have the highs and lows. But, it also points to maybe that he's not a 20-point per game scorer in the future, that he might be something less than that.
Well, I think it remains to be seen. I think that, to me, it's, they've certainly got the confidence he'll be a scorer in this league, and I think, certainly they think he's going to have star potential, and I don't think they're wrong in that regard. But the one thing we knew about Keegan Murray is he could score, he can shoot. Even if it is his second year, the thing that maybe concerns me most, because there are games, as you mentioned, where he's going to struggle to shoot the ball, and we've seen it a lot this year. But in those games, and this is, maybe a little bit of comparison to Kevin Huerter, we talked about how he tries to impact the game with his rebounding, maybe some assists, try to help out in other ways when he's on the court, if his shot isn't going down. And that's the one thing that's been a little bit alarming, is for Keegan, with his size and certainly he's shown the ability to rebound. Those games where he's scoring, it feels like he impacts the game in other ways outside of scoring than he does in the games where, he struggles to shoot the ball. The minutes don't really dwindle. Like, Mike Brown is still giving him a boatload of minutes, even in games where he struggles. And that, to me, is the more concerning part, is like, you don't show up in the rebounding category very often when he tends to have those games.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, again, if the Kings have other players who are inconsistent like this.
Absolutely.
But they're veterans. And
Yep.
so when they're inconsistent, it's like, come on, stop being inconsistent, bring the same energy each and every night. With Keegan, I do think at the end of the day, like, we're going to see him slowly, like, ascend, like slowly climb. And I think we're seeing the beginning of a climb right now, where again, he's all the way up to 16.2, but I would be surprised if he's not at over 17 points a game in another week or so. And then maybe even get himself up to 18 points per game by the end of the season. I think we're seeing, like, this slowly. We're seeing the outline of what is going to be a really, really good score. One of my concerns, though, is that he seems to be just fine doing, having a big game against some bad teams. And he needs to figure out how to do that against good teams as well. And sure, like, he's had a couple of big games against good teams, but, again, the last two games where, 25 points and 28 points and all that stuff, or what do you have, 32? These are bad teams, and you should be doing that against bad teams. I need to see it each and every night, and it's just going to be a slow progression with him, I think, where he finally gets to that point. But I've been pretty happy about what I've seen from him. Like, again, they're slowly letting him take more and more. We've seen the fall away off of one leg, like the Dirk Nowitzki jumper at the top of the key. We saw him, like, he's dunked the ball a lot more this season. I think he's at like 27 dunks on the season. He had the really nice couple of takes to the basket in this last game, where he's using the floater, he's going off the glass, he's getting out in transition and beating guys down the court. So I think, again, the sky's the limits, but like, we have to be slightly patient. Sabonis.
I've also liked, by the way, like, I mean, we've talked a lot over the, course of the season so far about, him making a leap defensively and, really throwing his bigger body at some of these smaller guards to try to kind of not only clog the lane, but impede their penetration. And, he's sneakily getting a lot of steals this year. Like steals are way up. He's had multiple games where there's like 3 steals in a game. So that certainly stands out, and he should be definitely applauded for that effort at defensive end.
Yeah, he's at 1.2 steals per game. I think he's been really good defensively, and I'd also make the argument that the way he's playing defensively, he's opened a door for the Kings where they can go shop for a 3, they can go shop for a 4, they can even shop for a 3. I mean a 2 in my book. Like it just doesn't matter. His positional flexibility gives the Kings a lot of like leeway when they're going into trade talks. So if you want to go grab a power forward like Pascal Siakam or one of these guys that we keep hearing, whether it's Kyle Kuzma or that's fine. But if you want to go look at a small forward like an Andrew Wiggins and push Keegan over to the 4 full time, or have him stay at the 4 full time, I think you can do that. I even think that there's a way that if you were to get 2 much bigger players, that he could play the 2, because at some point he decided that he could actually he can defend almost anybody. And that's a concern. It's not whether he can play offense as a shooting guard. It's whether he can defend the 2. And I think right now I'd have more faith in him defending a shooting guard, an opposing shooting guard, than any of their shooting guards or their small forwards outside of him. I just think he's taken such a huge step on that end of the court.
Yeah, it's really those bigger players that tend to give him fits, or someone who can, you get someone like a Jaylen Brown or somebody like that, and just get right by you from a 3-4 position. And you've seen him get blown by at times, and it's interesting because a lot of the guards don't really have that impact because of how big he is. He's somehow able to use his length to kind of impede them,
corral people. Yeah. Like we talk about this all the time, but I just, it seems like every pod we need to bring it up. Domantas Sabonis is playing at like an incredible level. Right now, Sean's been asking him to get over 20 points a game for 2 years. And here he is. He's at 20.2. He's at 12.7 rebounds, which I believe still leads the league. He still leads the league in rebounding. He's at 7.7 assists. He's 20 consecutive double-doubles. He's up to 9 triple-doubles on the season, which is second only to Jokic. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he's just doing everything.
I almost should take credit, not for the 20-point thing. I had a moment where I was talking to him about the triple doubles, and I was like, "Is that frustrating? Where you just does anyone tell you that you need one more rebound, you need an assist?" And he's just like, "No, it's one of those things where he had so many of them that would just come up short, and
he's not a stat watcher,
doesn't give a damn, right?" So, and then once I brought that up, he went on that roll of just like, here's like 7 in 10 games, so
it's wild.
Yeah. It's really incredible. I mean, it's also weird to me, James, seeing how, and maybe this was the fault of Russell Westbrook in a way, because of, if you remember his incredible run for a couple seasons where he was just shattering triple doubles and the records that were kind of associated with that, where people don't think of triple doubles the same way anymore. Like, it's still, in my opinion, really incredible when a player can have that type of impact. And then if you can do it consistently, that's just mind-boggling. Like, that's why you look back at a player like Oscar Robertson and you just go, wow. I mean, for as long as we did, and then you get to and he predates both of us. I mean, we're not that old, but that's why we have him, and speak of Oscar Robertson in such reverence and what he was able to do back then. And then you contrast that now, where it's like, oh, it's a triple double. Where like now it's just doesn't have the
triple-double,
the gravitas that it probably should. I don't know. Maybe it's because people think that statistically, like, some of it's hollow, or especially the way Rajon Rondo was able to get assists. Like, it was almost like kind of frowned upon, like if guys are hunting for assists or hunting for only that stat, or maybe, I don't know. I think it should still have a gravitas about it, and I don't think it's given the proper respect, if it will. Maybe that's the fault of someone like Russell Westbrook, who just corralled up all these triple doubles. It's interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get where you're going there. Westbrook and then Harden did it right afterwards. But
Harden,
then
sure.
you look at this season, and it's really only Jokic, Sabonis, and Luka Doncic, and it was the same thing last year. And it's not like
Yeah.
they're putting up 40-something triple doubles in a season. The double doubles, the 20 straight double doubles, and I think he's got a double double like all but 2 games this season. Like it's really impressive. But so far on the season, just so people kind of grasp what's happening, total rebounds on the season, Domantas Sabonis leads with 469. Defensive rebounds, Domantas Sabonis leads with 345. Rebounds per game, 12.7, leads all NBA players in rebounds per game. Rebounds per game. But then he's also 6th in the league in assists at 286 assists. He's 7 in assists per game at 7.7. Like this dude is stuffing the stat sheet like nobody's business. And I swear people talk about the things he can't do, and they refuse to talk about the things that he does do. And like,
Right.
look, every player has a limitation. Even right now, he's shooting like 39% from 3. Like everything that he's doing right now is spectacular. And it may not, his points per game may not stick over 20 per game. I think right now it's part of the issue that De'Aaron Fox is kind of having like a downswing, and they're waiting for guys like Kevin Huerter or Harrison Barnes to like figure out what's happening to their games. But
someone to walk through the door,
or for someone to walk through the door, which to be honest with you, I think is a higher likelihood than either one of those guys figuring it out. I think it's more likely that they figure out a way out of town than they figure out a way to start being more productive as players. So yeah, I think it's interesting. We've got all kinds of like ways that this team can improve now that you didn't think of before, because nobody had a bad game like this, a bad season like this last year, where they just, there was so much room for growth from individual players. Like I think last year, most of the Kings players tapped out on who and what they could be. This year, again, like the Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, even Chris Duarte's of the world, like they should have a lot more to offer than what we're seeing right now. Sean, let's get to the business of basketball. We've got the Kings are like in this weird moment where I think everybody in the league knows that they're trying to improve on the trade market. And like we've talked about who you wouldn't go after. We've talked about, some of the players that you might like kick the tires on. But as we get this close, like how quickly do you think that they're going to make a deal here? And how much do they need to make a deal, even though they are 9 games over? Because it feels like there's just like some incompleteness to this roster.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to answering the question of can they survive with the 2 guard spot kind of being this shaky thing, because in order to make a deal, you need 2 to tango. Sometimes you need 3 or 4 to tango.
Yeah.
And do you need to make a deal? No. You need to make the right deal. And that's, I think, where if you look at the landscape of what it would take, and I think oftentimes when fans and media try to make these trade scenarios, you do so by looking at the players that you don't value as much, moving those players along with a pick and then turning it into a diamond or something that's really going to help you. And the reality is that's just not that realistic.
Yeah, not all trades are worked out that way.
So to find something that you're going to be able to do this swing for the fences type move that also is like the no-brainer, this guy helps you so much, and turns you into that next caliber type of team, which is the type of move, in my opinion, that they need to make. But what does that come at the expense of? So I think there's they're going to be super aggressive like they are every single year. This front office has shown the ability to want to have conversations and keep options open and try to better their team. But sometimes the biggest moves you make are the ones you don't. And I think last year you saw that with obviously they made the tertiary move with Kessler Edwards. They've certainly, you've seen guys come in like a Juan Toscano Anderson, who was waived, before his contract was guaranteed. Now you've got him on a 10-day, and you're seeing him contribute on this road trip. They're gonna, look under every stone and see what they can do for sure to try to better this team. But can they pull off a move? I think there are moves out there to be made for sure. But I just don't know that it's going to have I don't think it's going to be that swing for the fences type move to be that type of piece that they really need. And quite honestly, that's okay. I mean, you look at this, like this team and their core and the way they're set up, it's like, okay, this is technically year 2, but really year 3 in a sense of the way the front office is tinkering with this team and putting the proper pieces in place. It's year 2 under Mike Brown, and it's year 2 under the success that they've enjoyed, but it really started before that. And I just think that this is a trade deadline where I'm expecting a lot of movement to be made, and I'm expecting the Kings to be involved very, very much so. I just question whether or not they can really truly land that piece that they sorely need.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like when you watch a player all the time, like we watch Harrison Barnes play every game. I think like you instantly think, okay, he's having a horrible season. And why would someone want to trade for him? He's 31 years old. He's got 2 more years. But then you go back and you look at the track record of Harrison Barnes. You look that he's not a guy who's out of shape. He's not a guy who looks like his body's breaking down. He's a guy who looks like he's really taken a step down on the pecking order. And so he still might have value to other teams where he doesn't have as much value to you at this point. And so I think that that's one way that like you have to look at these trades. I also think that, like Sean, to your point, sometimes the trades that you don't make, like that's the biggest thing that you did. And like to be honest with you, like the Pascal Siakam thing, if I'm the Kings, I'm kind of sighing a deep breath right now. Like if he really wants max money, and that's a contract, just so people know, it's if he's your own free agent and he wants a full max, you're looking at 5 years and like $250 million. And so there's a point where he would be making $60 million a year. And at that same point, you're going to have De'Aaron Fox, who's making 60 million, and you're going to have Domantas Sabonis, who's making 56, and you're going to have Keegan Murray's making 30 million. Like I already blew through the salary cap, and now you're wondering how deep into the luxury tax you're going to go, right? And so while Sean and I both have been on record saying, "Hey, yeah, Pascal Siakam, bring him on board," like if that's what he wants, and he doesn't want to sign in Sacramento, but even if he did, if he's looking for a full max money deal, that's a really, really tough pill to swallow. And that's where I think, you have to be cautious with how you spend your money. You have to measure 2 players against each other and say, okay, like while Pascal Siakam is a better player than Kyle Kuzma, like number one, I'm not going to have to pay as much for Kyle Kuzma up front. Number 2, he's on a declining scale contract. And there's a point where Kyle Kuzma could be making close to a third of what Pascal Siakam would make under an extension. And I would prefer a guy that might be a little bit less, but that makes a third the money so I can put that money into other positions. And so I think it's a really complex game that the Kings are playing. And it's not as easy as, again, just jumping on a trade machine and saying, this is who I got, this is who you got, and let's do this. It's, you got to look at motivations. You got to look at, where teams are at in their build or whether they're dissolving. I think there are deals out there. We've seen in the past, the Kings grabbed Harrison Barnes for Justin Jackson and Zach Randolph's expiring contract, who hadn't even played. They told him, you don't even need to come to the building. We're okay. So there are deals out there like that, but you got to find them. You got to mine for them, and the players got to fit with what you're doing. And you have to be patient because sometimes those things don't come up until the last second. So anyway, that's a long way of saying, like, I don't know what they're going to do, but being aggressive, I think is okay.
I think, and we've talked about it in previous shows, like, look, if you're going to be a big boy in this league, luxury tax is almost a necessity. And I brought it up because I had somebody off air talk to me about like how common are these teams that are paying luxury tax. And currently there are 10. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There are 10, and we'll go from 10 to 1. The Los Angeles Lakers, the New Orleans Pelicans, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Denver Nuggets, the Miami Heat, the Boston Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Phoenix Suns, the LA Clippers, and the Golden State Warriors. So how many losers do you see in there?
One. And it's the one that's paying the most, and they're also the one with 4 rings.
I was gonna say, and they just recently won a championship
2 years ago.
Like, yeah, and you look at it, you look in like the past few years, like, okay, Milwaukee championship, right? Warriors dynasty. Heat has been in the NBA Finals. Celtics have been in the NBA Finals.
Yeah,
right. Denver just won a championship. Sixers in the conversation. Pelicans are a little bit new to it, and the Lakers won the bubble year, and they just won the in-season tournament. So, like, if you want to be have to pay luxury tax. And so you look at what your luxury tax, you know, your tax bill is, you know, like for the Lakers at 10th, it's 3.1 million. Pelicans in 4th, 4.4 million. You jump up to 7 where the Nuggets are at, their tax bill, mind you, 22.7 million. Let's jump up to top 5. Celtics, 39.1 million. Bucks, 57.7 million.
Keep going up.
For some reason the Suns actually have a smaller tax bill for whatever reason. I can't remember why that is. They're in 3rd. They have the luxury tax space is negative 21.5, but their tax bill is 7 million less than number 4 Milwaukee, even though the Suns are in number 3. So they're at 50 million, 50.6 million. Then it's a whopping, now you jump almost $100 million to the top 2. The Clippers are at 142 million, and then the Warriors at 186 million. So if you want to know where the Sacramento Kings fall in all that, they are 22nd. They don't have a luxury tax bill. They have $18 million in surplus from the tax at a whopping, what is it?
They got paid.
The luxury tax payroll is 147 million. Compared to that of like the Warriors, who's at a 206, almost 203 million.
Yeah. So Sean, Kyle and I on the Insiders on ESPN 1320 today, we discussed, I know it was just for sake of a discussion. Would the Kings and Warriors ever make a trade of Harrison Barnes and Davion Mitchell for Moses Moody and Andrew Wiggins? Right. And I think right away everyone's like, oh, well, Kings fans are like, yuck, I'm not sure about Andrew Wiggins. But sure, we'll take Moses Moody. And Warriors fans are like, number 1, we don't want Harrison Barnes back. And number 2, Davion Mitchell's, we don't want him at all. Right? Do you know how much money that would save the Golden State Warriors, that trade?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but with the luxury tax, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's beyond crazy. So I reached out to Eric Pincus, who is a salary cap genius, right? Eric Pincus. I said, hey, the Warriors are 41 to 42 million over the luxury tax. How much would it be? Because the difference between those two deals, the deal works as far as the NBA trade structure, right? But the Warriors would save $6.1 million in off of their salary. And you're like, okay, well, that doesn't seem like it would be that much. Their tax bill would go from 186 to 47.9 million. They would drop $38 million off their tax bill if they made that move. And if you don't think the Warriors would consider that deal, I mean, again, if I'm the Kings, I'm not sure that I'm considering taking 3 more years of Wiggins with the final year being $30 million. But I'm going to consider it if you think Moses Moody is as good as some people think Moses Moody is. So I would take on a young player, and I would take on a bloated contract in order to take on a young player if I thought it might make sense for me down the road. And I think the Warriors have to look at it and go, okay, we could save how much? Because it's not just the 38 million, it's the 6 million in salary you would save as well. So you're looking at them saving like $44 million by making that trade for a team that's 3 games under 500.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like,
well, and that's just for this season, like rattling off all those numbers. And with that in mind, like you're looking at the Warriors at $202 million or whatever I just said a minute ago, like again, or $186 million tax bill.
Yeah.
that is just for this season.
Well,
You
Sean,
know,
and not only that, but that's just their tax bill. That's not their salary. Their salary is 211 million bucks. Their salary and tax bill is almost 400 million dollars. So, would they
right,
consider shaving 46 million, 44 million off that? Yes. Yes, they would.
right.
Yes. Like, I'm not saying they're going to give you a Kaminga, but they certainly like, okay, well, Most Moody's a nice player, but if he can get us out from underneath some of this debt, then we might consider it. So
Well,
yeah,
it's worth it to a team like that when you're trying to preserve a dynasty and trying to remain competitive and still, be in contention for the fight. But when you're looking at them, you know, struggling the way they are and the writing's on the wall, I don't care if they're about to get Draymond Green back. Like, I don't think you're flipping a switch all of a sudden to become this elite team again. And you're
mhm.
paying this team as if they're an elite team. So yeah, I mean, everyone knew this was going to be kind of. I think last year that's why we kind of talked about it. The way the Golden State Warriors will not be the way the Golden State Warriors last year or this coming year, and that was this season. Bob Myers being really the piece we were talking about being gone, and they're going to have to make tough decisions. You see what's happening to Klay Thompson, which, by the way, I don't know if you had a chance to see. He had a very he's been a very polarizing character this season for that team and around the league, and seeing some of the things he said. And obviously, he's due a contract at the end of the year that he may not get. Certainly not a max contract that he probably thought he was going to get. He's just not the player he used to be, and he won't be paid as such. And so, him having that moment recently, it was just about a week ago or so, where he's talking about having a long conversation with Steve Kerr and how it's affected his game and how he has to realize the type of player he is and try to set a good example for the up and coming players that he's, a different player than he once was. And not that he can't still be a very impactful player, but it's really affected him from a mental standpoint, and he needs to be a good teammate. And
That was a great
hearing
exchange. Great
hearing him
exchange.
talk about it was incredible. Yeah.
But then he turns around and today talks about how he doesn't care about fans booing and like he really is struggling with like
Yeah.
who he is as a basketball player and where he's going. And like, look, that's like every great dynasty, it dies out. It does. And so they're just one of many, many NBA dynasties that have died out. And it's tough to watch because you're seeing sort of the ends of it. And their struggle, this whole two timeline thing, at this point, there's zero timeline. That's what's happened. They went from like trying to figure out two timelines to they don't have a timeline at all anymore. The young players that they're talking about, again, like Pajemski and why am I Trace Jackson Davis?
Mhm.
Like, there's a perfectly fine players, but Trace Jackson Davis was a late second round pick. Like Pajemski isn't a lottery pick. Like these aren't players that you're going to be able to build your franchise around. Just like Jordan Poole, you didn't know if you're going to be able to build your franchise around him. So I think it's really interesting to watch sort of the back end. And Bob Myers becomes like the most brilliant man of all time. Because not only did Bob Myers not draft all those players, he did not fully assemble this team. That was Larry Riley. He didn't draft Clay. He didn't draft Steph. He didn't draft Draymond. That was all done before he got there. But before the whole thing falls apart, he's like, I'm out of here. And now he's watching the thing like Steve Kerr is the guy who's taken the hit now. Steve Kerr is the guy who's been pushed out in front and like, oh, what's happening here? And then you got Mike Dunleavy, who just in all honesty, he doesn't have ties to all these guys like Bob Myers did. And so he's gonna do what he's got to do that might be best for him to like try to save what's happening here. And yeah, it's interesting to watch the fall of a dynasty. And who knows? Maybe they do find lightning in a bottle and they make one more run or something. But it's tough to see just like the salary structure, everything else. An owner that's willing to pay $186 million just in luxury tax, $400 million overall. He's paying almost 3 times what Vivek Ranadive is paying for the same for his club.
Yeah. And he's not even at this moment, not even in the play-in tournament.
Yeah. And if you factor in the 147, but then would we say 12 million or 18 million in luxury tax that the Kings got back? that drops their salary to like 130. He literally is paying 3 times the amount for Loic is for the Warriors. So pretty incredible how this is going to play out. But yeah, it's wild. This is trade season is about. We'll keep covering trades and everything else. Sean, we'll make this our final thoughts. Let's just have a discussion. You just did an interview, and it's not an easy one, and it's something that
Ugh.
like I've known has been coming for a little while because I have discussions. But go ahead and let's just let's have a conversation here. That's not an easy one.
No, it's not an easy one at all. And it was tough, earlier this week, really yesterday, I guess, is when some pictures that kind of circulated with Kings legend, fan favorite, and Scot Pollard, who's in need of a heart transplant. And he's, kind of kept a little bit of it private, I think, for the most part, up until really this week when he kind of put it out on social media, and it was kind of had a weird message behind it too, and almost having to, you know, people maybe insinuating that he's doesn't really have these struggles that he's going through. But yeah, 3 years ago, diagnosed with like a heart disease, and he's gone through various steps of trying to rectify that and ultimately needing a heart transplant. And that's not easy. It's not like, James or I needing a heart transplant. You're talking about a guy who's almost 7 foot tall.
Mhm.
And the likelihood of finding that is ultimately rare. And of course, the likelihood of finding it is a grim reality that it means someone has to die in order for him to get it. So it's a real troubling thing. It's a heavy conversation to have. And he was kind enough to join me earlier this morning to kind of talk about what he's been going through, some of the support he's received, and his ultimate message, which is just to, encourage people to become organ donors. And it's it was interesting catching up with him, because for a player who showed and played with a ton of heart, and here he is needing a new one, uh, kind of is just unbelievable. And I think if anyone can go through it, it's him. A very resilient person who likes adverse situations, and can, he's a gritty guy, man. It's the stuff that people rooted for him on the court for. And it's fun to see the outpouring of support on social media of people who reached out to him, and he's certainly seen it and interacted with a few. And uh, people who rooted for him on the court are now able to kind of root for him off the court, and he's now able to kind of be an inspiration to a lot of people that may not have known who he was. I mean, you think about it, James, he played in those early 2000s, spent 5 of his 11 NBA seasons in Sacramento. He's now 48 years old. It's far too young for someone to have to kind of go through something like this. And he was talking about how there's someone in his neighborhood who now who went through what he did, and they're now kind of close as a result of what that person went through, and ultimately probably would have never crossed paths with the guy had he not had that experience of needing an organ transplant. So not an easy conversation to have, kind of an emotional one. And I think once I release the interview later tonight, or if anyone has had a chance to see him speak recently, it's not the Scot Pollard that you're used to seeing, the jovial personality. It's very subdued, almost like he's kind of talking in a very humble, quiet, somber tone, because maybe he's not trying to make a lot of noise, but speaking actually exhausts him. We
Yeah.
have a long conversation where he'll have to take these long pauses and to take a deep breath and then continue on. And it wasn't easy, man. I cover sports for a reason. And, there's a lot of people who do what we do in news, and, they have to talk about heavy subjects all the time. I don't like having to do that. And so he was gracious enough to do it. I think it's an interview that Kings fans should probably hear, because they're so tied to the players, and those players always resonate with fans. There's such that connection between players and fans in this town. So, yeah, what he's going through is really tough.
Yeah. So I've known Scott for quite a while. Like he's come on the podcast a couple of times. I have a interview that's sitting in the can from years ago where I was gonna do a 2002 documentary, and he came in and talked. And I'll be honest, we were gonna have Scot Pollard on a happy hour, and I had reached out to him, and then eventually he got back to me and just said, "Hey, look, I can't talk for that long. I really, I'm going through it." So I've known about his heart problems for a while. His father passed away at a relatively young age, like in his 50s, from a heart attack, and so it's something that I think is there in the family's like history, and he's been struggling for a while. And I'd also say there's something, Scott went on Survivor, and again, we had him on the pod and talked about Survivor and all that stuff, like a while back, and just this amazing adventure. But he was turned into a villain on Survivor, and partially it's because, it's his personality, big and gregarious. But there was some scenes where it looked like he was bullying someone, and the production crew really focused on that, as opposed to the hundreds of hours of footage they had of him being a provider and taking care of that same person, and all of these other situations where he's actually a really, really good person on some of these scenes. And it really it hurt him, where he was confused by just the way he was portrayed, and then the reaction after the fact. And so I don't know that, like, his last couple of years have been like the finest, unfortunately for him. And it's just, it's a bummer. So hopefully something happens here, a miracle happens for him, and it brings up, like the Kings old equipment manager, uh, D
Dwayne
Wonder,
Wilson. Yeah.
Dwayne Wilson, who's absolutely incredible. He just went through this a couple of years ago. He's fought through, and he had a stroke when he was in his 20s, early 20s, and it damaged his heart. And eventually, he had to have a heart transplant. And now they just did this beautiful video on him, working at a blood bank and giving back. So, like, thoughts and prayers out to Scott and his family. It's not easy. He's a good dude. Not all of us are perfect. Not all of us make have a perfect straight line all the way through like your career and everything else. But I think Kings fans should, like, say a prayer for the dude. He's struggling. It's not been an easy go. Yeah. Is that,
Yeah,
is
well
that all
said.
of is that our final thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, it's a tough way to end there on a little somber note, but hopefully there's an uplifting, kind of conclusion to it at some point. But I will say this, there is, because I ended the interview on a really kind of a positive note for him, is his wife Dawn, who, by the way, was battling breast cancer years ago, and she was able to overcome that, and it's kind of been an inspiration in her own way. But aside from that, their son Ozzy is like a D1 football recruit that is going to be stepping into his senior year in high school in the Indiana area. They live outside of Indianapolis, and so he's got a few offers on the table. He's a tight end. He could probably be a defensive end, and just a guy that is such a rallying point for that family, who's been through some, pretty tough times off the, just with the health issues and things. But Ozzy is out here making some big strides in his own way. And so seeing him kind of see what lies ahead for his college football future will be a lot of fun to kind of keep tabs on.
All right. Okay. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking around all this time. Sean and I love doing these podcasts and hanging out with everybody. We're at almost an hour and 10 minutes in, and we did not have any breaking news while we're on the podcast, but I would say be ready, because it seems like things are bubbling behind the surface, and like something could go crazy at any moment with the Sacramento Kings team. They're going to be active. They're going to try to make some adjustments here. They're going to try to get better here at the trade deadline. And I would not be surprised if we see some action here in the coming days. So thanks for tuning into the KINGSBEAT podcast. We'll have a off the record with the KINGSBEAT virtual happy hour coming up very soon. Make sure to give us a thumbs
Just
up.
lying. Just
And I'm
continue
not
to lie
lying.
to people.
I'm not. Like, we're gonna do a live one. I haven't been able to get a live one. I believe, Sean, you know as well as I do. Like last week, I think I worked 70 hours, and so
Oh, where's that line? Where's the violin?
yeah, like I think that's where I was at. Like I think it was 70 plus, and like so sometimes you'd love to have everything just line up and we get it all done, but sometimes we're just way too busy to take care of everything. So we will have one of those coming up. Outside of that, make sure to jump on board with the Kings Beat. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Jump on board with Prize Picks. I'm having a great time doing it. I won. Yes, win.
That's amazing.
A win. It is amazing because I am epically bad, aren't I, Sean?
Well, yeah. I mean,
comically bad.
I keep telling you I want to see what your picks would look like with other NBA teams because you haven't nailed it when it comes to the Kings, but I would like to maybe see how you fare if you were betting on a game that you weren't, or excuse me, picking players on a team that possibly you weren't watching or so locked into.
I'm much better at NFL, and I've
Right.
done pretty well at NFL, so I should probably stick there. But hey,
you don't share your NFL picks. I want to see those picks. Put those
part
out
of what
there.
we're doing. Yeah, it's part of what we're doing here. Okay, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. Brendan will be back next week. We'll have more content for you. Keep your ears open. Things are happening. So get ready for craziness. And it should be an interesting couple of weeks in Kingsland. So for Fox 40, Sean Cunningham, I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. See you very soon.